Well, we're back to I hate to paint. And in this particular case, this is a painting technique that I actually enjoy doing. It's called dry brushing. And the thing I like about it is, as the old expression goes, sometimes there are happy accidents. With most painting, if you screw the whole thing up, you've ruined your model. With dry brushing, if you screw the whole thing up, it may actually turn out better than you had planned. Now, in this particular case, I'm using it to paint granite cliffs, and we're also going to be looking at using it to make muddy ruts in mud. But it can be used for figures. I use it quite often when I'm painting figures. I use it for all kinds of different things. The technique involves getting very, very, very little paint on your brush and then coming back over the surface. In this case, I'm just getting a little bit of paint on there and then wiping most of it off on a shop towel so that when I come in here, there's almost no paint at all on my brush. Moreover, the paint that I'm using has been sitting out for a few minutes. I squeeze a little out on a plate and then let that sit for perhaps 10 minutes. So the paint is already partially set up before I even dip my brush into it. And the brush, as the name implies, is dry. When you're using all paints, acrylics or whatever else you're using, you never want to use a brush that's completely dry. You want to dip it in some water if it's a water-based acrylic before you dip it into the paint. You just want to have your brush already moist. Not when you're doing dry brushing. You want a completely dry brush, and you'll dip that dry brush into the partially set paint. And then you're wiping a lot of that paint off the brush before you ever come over and start applying the brush to your surface. More often than not, you're using a much lighter color than the underlying surface, because what we're trying to do is bring out the highlights. We just want this to kind of touch along the highlighted surfaces of whatever it is we're dealing with, so that it creates this sense of light and shadow. And then you're using multiple coats. You come back over and over and over, gradually bringing those highlights out until you get the exact look that you want. In this case, I'm dry brushing ruts in mud. I've already put down this surface. I made this area, it's Sculpt-A-Mold, and then I have a little axle with some tires on it that I can run back and forth to make it look like people have been driving through here and there's tire tread, and in some places they got stuck in the mud, and that's all dried out now, and all that's left is the ruts. So I've put down a darker coat that consists of 3 different colors kind of blended back and forth, and now I'm highlighting all of that by dry brushing over the top of it to bring out the tire tread and so on. The color that I'm putting down right now seems to be lighter than I would want. It's a little too much of a contrast, but you need to keep in mind that these water-based acrylics dry to a much darker color. So it's a little bit of guesswork to try to figure out exactly what you're going to get once it's dry, and then you just have to let it dry for a little while and see what you got. In places where I've gotten a little too much paint on there, you'll notice how I can come back with the shop towel and just kind of wipe that area down a little bit. Now, keep in mind that the final thing I'm going to be doing here over the top of the dry brushing and everything is I'm actually going to be dumping actual dirt on top of here to give it a very earth-like appearance. I want all of these ruts and tire tread marks to be visible, but they will be visible through the actual dirt that I'm going to put down. So you can see that I have very, very little paint in the brush. I'm actually scrubbing it back and forth in order to transfer some of this lighter color onto the darker color. It's much easier to do multiple coats than it is to get too much on here and then try to deal with that. And as I'm working, the paint on my palette, my paper plate, is drying, and so it's getting thicker and heavier as I work with this making the dry brushing even more subtle, let's say, because the paint is becoming more and more dry as I work. I've got a very large area to cover here, and a lot of the area doesn't have any tire tracks or ruts or anything, but I'm still dry brushing the highlights of the Sculptamold that I've put down, just so that everything matches in. And then, like I say, over the top of all of this, there's going to be actual dirt and decomposed granite and some other textures. Then this stuff will just be showing up through that. If I get a little carried away with the effect and I want to take it back to more like the darker color, I can use the darker color again, very dilute as almost a wash, and put that over the top of the surface and let that dry, and then come back and dry brush on top of it again. So I find myself quite often working back and forth between washes and dry brushing. And again, let's keep in mind that these colors are going to darken, and so over the next half hour or so I'm going to see a change here, and then over the course of the next 12 hours or so I'll see even some more subtle changes. So you have to evaluate what you're doing really realistically the next day to see exactly what you've come up with. Dry brushing is one of those things where you really just have to jump in and start doing it. Everybody has a slightly different technique and therefore a little different outcome. And a lot of it just depends on what exactly it is you're painting. It wouldn't be quite this harsh. If you were painting a figure, for example, you might just be sort of highlighting facial features very, very gently, as opposed to creating tire ruts in mud. So now that you more or less understand the basics, dive in and do it. Get her done. Just try this out. It's an enormous amount of fun. Like I say, generally speaking, I hate to paint things because it's so easy to mess things up. Where in this case, messing things up more often than not leads to some sort of happy accident where you go, hey, that actually turned out quite nice. Anyway, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, please subscribe. And the easy way to do that is to click on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And Karen and I will see you here on Sunday with something fun. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.